Welcome to the show. We're diving in deep, talking ethics, the questions that keep our minds turning, learning, making things clear. From Plato to AI, the dilemmas are here. Ethics unwrapped, the world's in your hands. Decisions, revisions, we're taking a stand. Virtues and values, what's wrong is what's right. Join us as we think and shed some new light. Social media's poll, the tribal divides, the choices we make, the truths we decide. From cloning to cars, to tech-heavy twist, where ethics glides us through all of this. Ethics unwrapped, the world's in your hands. Decisions, revisions, we're taking a stand.
Welcome to Ethics Unwrapped. I'm Reese Stamler.
And I'm Harrison Wallace. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to be going over a wide range of ethical issues, ranging from social media addiction to cloning, and we might even get to a little bit of autonomous vehicles.
That's right, this podcast isn't just any other episode. It's actually our final project. And we chose to do a podcast instead of a normal reflection paper because we wanted to explore a more creative way to share what we've learned throughout the semester. Plus, who doesn't love a good conversation about ethics?
I definitely do. So, just to start off, we're going to actually talk about where we were at the beginning of the semester, even kind of before the class, on different ethical issues and kind of like our just knowledge of it. For me, it was almost none because in high school I had almost no really exposure to anything really like this. The most I knew was this old like philosophy YouTuber named Wisecrack he would like go in like examine a bunch of like movies, TV shows, then apply like ethical theories to them and talk about like the philosophy behind them. So it was really cool whenever like I kind of came in, I was like able to like really look like and use these theories in just a really exact way and to like help me one like get a better understanding of stuff, but also just kind of like really just kind of dig deep into what different things mean and like how to like really look at stuff.
That's very interesting.
Thank you, Reese.
You know, for me personally, in the beginning of this class, I expected, just like the typical debates about whether something is right and wrong, but we explored way more than that. And
I feel like that's almost like it wasn't really even right or wrong. It was more of like responses to things. That's like almost what we really got into. Yeah.
Essentially, expected like to learn mainly just lectures about different philosophers and what they taught, but it went way deeper than that. And I'm excited to show what we've learned,
especially about the business stuff. Like whenever like we really started applying it to like some of the business practices and like obviously making money from it while being a good person is always fun. So that was pretty nice to learn.
Do not expect the whole aspect where you're free to say whatever you'd like to, like whether it's controversial and whatnot. It's just very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good thing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Let's see here. But yeah, I think that a lot of this class though, like right before it, I remember driving down here, I like found out we had the assignment due and I started just listening to all the YouTube videos in the car. I thought it was a really cool introduction to the class. A lot of like Plato's kind of cave theory, and then it kind of set up like what we're actually going to learn. I think like it gave me like I think one of the most unique perspectives was probably like the cave dilemma. Which one was I like that one a lot. That one I kind of knew already, but like kind of saying like and like it was more of taking it instead of like a literal context and more of like a like how you're interacting with like social media. I think that was really interesting about like how like if someone is like basically creating a cave without you like really knowing it.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that can be applied to more than just social media, and we'll show that later on in the podcast.
Yeah.
But the framing of the podcast we'll have 5 different segments, each focused on a different idea we were focused on this semester, such as AI, cloning, social media, or autonomous vehicles and autonomous weapons, and then we'll finish off with the Apple case study.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, let's dive right into it. So number 1, social media.
Welcome back to Ethics Unwrapped. And now we're going into our first segment on social media. We're excited to bring in a debate and just discuss overall what we've learned throughout the semester.
So first, we're just going to kind of go over some of the ethical systems that are going to kind of drive through some of our main points and also what we're going to be talking about. So I think you want to talk about care ethics first, right? That's one you want to bring up?
Yeah, so Yeah, no, one complicated issue with social media and social media companies is they prioritize engagement over accuracy, which lead to misinformation spreading like wildfire.
It's also about like addicting you to like
Yeah.
big money type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so what their goal is to have you addicted and have you constantly engaged. So they use design principles in order to do that, which is very complicated. And Care Ethics answers this because it's like this is a problem that they're not taking responsibility for the well-being of their users, and you're supposed to design for the user's experience and the user's well-being. And care ethics emphasizes relationships and prioritizing the needs of others. Therefore, through the care ethics philosophy, social media companies are outright wrong and deserve regulation. What do you think?
I think that it's like a weird in between because they didn't start off like that. Like they started off on like college campuses and they kind of slowly expanded into these huge companies that are absolutely out of control. And I mean, we exist in our free markets, like technically, as long as you're not like selling something that's already regulated, it's like legal to do. So it's not like they were like stepping out of their boundaries, but that also gets into like some more of like the actual ethical systems that have been set in place, like like the actual rules and like all that stuff. Because they didn't break any rules, they just really messed a lot of people up in like a really long lasting way. And so I think like that kind of, but first, before we get into all that, I'm going to talk a little bit about like tribal ethics and how it applies to this, and also the cave algor that I was talking about earlier. So tribal ethics, a lot of it relies on honor and respect and like others as individuals, and kind of taking that always into your day-to-day life, even if it's like someone you don't necessarily like, you still are going to treat them with honor and respect. And so that like one is not very present on social media, even outside of the company. They've definitely pushed kind of like wouldn't you agree that like a lot of like big social media influencers don't really care? Like,
yeah, I'd say most social media influencers do not care for the well-being of their own users. They're just trying to gain engagement.
They're like using the algorithms that like the company set up for them, basically, just so that it's like it's not a very nice loop.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah. The influencers who are bringing the engagement in the app are incentivized to use their their
like
algorithms,
the addictive
algorithms, and all the successful influencers use that for sure.
Yeah, like either it's like through bad behavior or interesting content, spicy stuff on social, that type of thing. But I think a lot of it's also designed to go after kids too. Yeah. Like they like want them to basically get addicted. Like they want kids to get addicted, so they just keep on coming back and keep watching it.
And they're the most susceptible to it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the studies done, like studying like how your brain, like it physically changes. Like when like you've been exposed to it for so long, it takes almost a year for it to go back to normal. Just because like the dopamine receptors have been like going off so much, they only actively like it's like a lot of like gambling. Like like when you like go on there. Yeah. But so going back to the cave algorithm, that kind of feeds into it. But a big part of the Plato's cave thing is that they're all in a cave. No one really knows they're in a cave, but they're all kind of just flashing like a light to like make all these shadows kind of like basically tell them a story, which kind of goes into another really dark part, which is the widespread manipulation of everybody. Just kind of like these one really powerful companies like on either side of the board, like sending out like subliminal messages or just direct messages and like trying to influence people. It's like their cause, which is one, not the purpose of the app, and two, is very dangerous for our society if like a few people would just control it, because that's not really like a democracy. It's like you like think like you're like thinking like it, but like you're not really.
I guess a good question we could debate about is whether there should be regulation or complete banning of social media for children, and for the sake of this argument, we'll say under the age of 13 years old.
I mean, I'm definitely in the anti-social media group. I do not like it at all.
Okay, that's could you provide your reason why?
Probably just because like, I mean, I know people that like spend like almost like 13 hours on it like a day, and it can like lead to like others. It's just like, I hate how it's made. Like it's pushed like some like agendas that like aren't like it's really impressionable on young kids. It makes some kids think like some stuff is totally normal when it's like not. Like for example, like a lot of like the prank, like extreme prank channels that go around and basically just beat people up. Yeah, like those are pretty. I think everyone, like no matter where you stand, can agree that kids should not be exposed to that and think it's normal.
Yeah, it's definitely detrimental to the development of a children's brain.
Yeah.
I'd say, well, that's not debatable. But for the case of this argument, what should be the proposed regulation? So, should they be completely banned from social media? And I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I think for me, it's like really weird because I'm very for like free market. Companies should be allowed to do whatever they want. But in this case, it goes almost directly against it because I really, really like. I think it should be banned, like, or at least like reduced to back kind of like what it used to be when it first came out, when it was more of just a way to connect people. Because like, it is really important to note that like it is a really powerful thing to connect people, like spread like something really bad has happened and spread like actually really like there's a lot of good messages on social media too. Like, it's not all bad, but there are a lot, there are definitely a lot. I think a lot of the bad is kind of like outweighed the good, and so a lot of it like there's also just going back to like tribal ethics. There's just no like respect. There's absolutely there's no respect, and I think that the impressions that it has on young girls, like I have like a little cousin that like I like saw over the break, and she's like 10 and like was talking about stuff that I had no idea at her age. And I'm like how the hell do you know this? Like
it's very interesting. And I'd like to wrap up for our first segment. That's our time, and we'll go on to our second segment, focusing on AI. Welcome back to Ethics Unwrapped Segment 2, where we'll be focusing on AI. AI is revolutionizing so many different aspects of our lives and is rapidly developing, outpacing our own human comprehension. And first, I would like to discuss one of the key ethical frameworks we learned about this semester, being utilitarianism, which focuses on the maximizing the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people.
and also, we're also going to be talking about the dangers of this as well.
100%.
Yeah.
And so, well, first, let's dive into the dangers of AI and the pros of AI.
So we're going to bring up one very specific, very tragic instance of a boy that took his own life due to a chatbot. And so, much like the social media segment right before, it was due to a company that was abusing their power. They knew that like these people were going to come back, and so they made a chatbot where this thing just was designed to keep them coming back. And so that for me was like a crazy like moment when we were like learning about that. One, because them just throwing out like almost any ethical system whatsoever is wild, while they're breaking out the rules, is a pretty crazy but also harmful thing for our society. Do you want to have anything to say about that? Or?
Yeah, so I guess staying in the utilitarianist view, I would argue against that. So your case that it's very specific and targeting specifically that company, but AI as a whole has way better potential to help the greater amount of people with their applications in healthcare and climate change mitigation. So how would you argue against the utilitarianist view?
Argue against? I mean, so you could like kind of like a weird argument that you could make is that technically these pitfalls that AI, I don't really agree with it, but the only counter argument that I can think of to this is that some people, like computer scientists, might argue that having these, not that platform specifically, I could never think of any aspect where a love bot could help advanced AI in a positive way. But a lot of computer scientists are like seeing that like AI needs to learn about different aspects of the human experience, and obviously the human experience is not all good. So I guess the argument against it would be like it was almost like a necessary evil, so that way you could get a super advanced AI to help a lot of people, so that way it could like help with education, help with healthcare, help with just engineering like in general. But the problem with this, and I think the big problem, is that like we need to keep AI is a tool like anything else mankind has made, and whenever someone misuses that tool, I mean things go wrong. So I think that we need to be really, really specific on how AI can be used. So obviously, not like the case where it was used as basically a love chatbot. I think that it should be used really just almost for scientific purposes and like that type of comprehension, because that would really help push humanity forward. But a lot of companies are seeing the value and using it for malpractice or bad kind of like practices, and so that's kind of pushing humanity back.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, going along with the chatbot scenario, it's good. Honestly, you could reference back to the allegory of the cave, because
That's true.
because
You totally can.
companies are utilizing that.
That's more direct than social media too.
Yeah,
That's literally it. Yeah.
Because the companies are having you the shadow of the chatbot, that you have a real relationship in real life, but in reality, it's just a
fake.
computer program tailored to answer every question specifically to you.
Yeah.
And that's it's a terrible thing that they're doing, and I believe it affects human autonomy like as a whole, and mental health is just.
I think it destroyed. What really stinks is that obviously these companies are pushing like, oh, these people are lonely, they need people to talk to. I think that there's a ton of solutions for every like problem. Think about it from an engineering perspective. This is not the right solution for people that are incredibly lonely and that are on themselves, are in a vulnerable point in their life. I think they need to like go out, just try and interact with more people, and people need to come together and actually support them. I think that's probably a bigger issue, of people not supporting others.
100%. I completely agree, and that was very interesting. Should we head over to the third segment?
Yeah, sure. We can head over to the third segment.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
See you on the third segment. Welcome back to Ethics Unwrapped. We're in segment 3, and we're excited to talk about our fascinating and very controversial topic of cloning. And we're excited to look through it the lens of virtue ethics and indigenous perspectives to truly unpack clothing from an ethical perspective.
So the big thing when you look at cloning through virtue ethics is a lot of like, it's two sides. One side is that you can be saving someone's life, and the other side, so that's obviously like the compassion part, or really like it's like greater good. The other part though is that you are actively like, whoever cells you're using, whichever they are, like unless like somehow we magically just make cells out of thin air without getting anyone's DNA, is that we are like infringing upon that person's like rights. Even if they sign, like let's say like they signed it away and they say it's perfectly fine, you still have to deal with the fact that you are remaking another person, which is just like infringing on their rights or not. Like, I mean, companies can just totally go in and just mass market like organs, or just mass market people, should be probably one of the worst scenarios. And then just break, like it opens the door to a lot of human rights issues. Also, it opens the door to what it actually means to be human. I think that's a big one. Because if you're like a clone, I mean, you are biologically like the exact same as like the person you came from, right?
Yeah, it brings in a lot of ethical issues about the rights of clones.
Yeah.
And as well, discrimination, discriminating clones brings in a lot of different issues. I guess from the virtue ethics perspective, it would rely on a balance of the doctors and the scientists. Are they cloning with compassion, or are they cloning with
like for like selfish purposes?
Yeah.
Like a lot of I mean, like let's look at the opioid epidemic. It started with a few doctors being like, this is going to help people that have had traumatic injuries. They're going to be able to continue life as normal. And then it just turned into doctors like selling a ton of opioids. Coming from Houston, it's where lean popped up, and that started because a bunch of doctors were like, oh, we can abuse the system, let's abuse it. And they just started selling very powerful cough syrup on the side.
So, interesting point. You believe with the development of the cloning industry, the healthcare slash doctors will take advantage of that, similar to they take advantage of drugs. And
I think it's definitely a possibility, and I think it would be like you would have to monitor. I mean, we try and monitor like how drugs are distributed in the medical community now, but that's not really done that well. I mean, we can like talk about like, but also that goes into like the indigenous perspective or the tribal ethics too.
Yeah.
Like we can. Do you want to jump?
Yeah,
on that?
So looking at it from a indigenous perspectives lens, they emphasize the relationality, like interconnected and respect for the natural world, and cloning completely dismisses this.
Yeah.
And because it's really from that perspective, it's really disregarding the value of life, and in that sense, it's violating this respect of life and commodifying it, and even using it as a profit in some cases. But this is a very limited that aspect.
I mean, there's a lot of good. Like, I mean, anyone that's like lost a family member because they've been on the organ waiting list would tell you like, if there was a way to like save them, like they would do it in a heartbeat. Like, I think like it has the potential to save so many lives. I think where it goes wrong or dangerous is like when you're remaking an entire human.
Yeah. So after analyzing it through the virtue ethics and indigenous perspective, person's perspective, you believe that cloning of organs is ethical, however the cloning of humans is not.
I think the remaking of like an entire new human is completely unethical.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, just purely because like it leaves a lot to be. I mean, what's going to happen to that person? Like, are they just being made from like one specific thing, and that specific thing could be pretty bad? Like, what if someone tries to like make a ton of like sex workers or like stuff like that? Like, I don't think anyone should be spawned in this world just to like be told like this is what your job is.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I associate myself more with the indigenous perspectives on cloning rather than the value, just because while there is the argument for the virtue ethics, you could use that to say, people are cloning humans in order to have, like, for instance, if someone would clone their spouse died, and they wanted to clone their spouse, you could argue with the virtue ethics that it is ethical to clone humans. But from the indigenous person's aspect, I believe it aligns with us completely.
Yeah, I think also looking back at like the virtue ethics stuff, like it's a very thin line, because like if like you're trying to go on the compassionate side, just go that total route, you are being compassionate because you're saving a life. You're helping to save like someone that's dying. They need a heart transplant. There's no hearts on the list, and there might not be one for a long time. But on the other side, you could be like completely like ignoring someone's rights, and then like there's also just a lot of very bad things that could happen if people like are given the power to create someone, and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, 100%. Sounds like a Terminator movie.
It does kind of sound like it's like what's Blade Runner? Blade Runners.
I've not seen that.
You need to check that. That's like basically like all of this is.
I guess I have one closing question or topic of debate before we end this segment. Would you believe it's ethical if cloning, for instance, someone needed a heart transplant or they're about to die? Would you believe it's ethical if they clone a human just to use their heart in order to transplant it into...
Like, that's the only way. Like, you have to make the whole human.
You have to make the whole human, and then you take the heart, and then the clone would die.
I don't know. That's a really good question. I guess, like, what would you say that? I needed time to think on that one.
It's a very complicated
that's like the, like,
from the indigenous perspective, that'd definitely be a hard no.
Yeah, but from the virtue ethics side, it's kind of like a mixed batch. On one way, it's absolutely not, but then on the other way, it's absolutely yes, because you have to save their life.
100%.
And like that's what like that philosophy entails. Like you have to like do whatever is necessary to like for the greater good, or not greater good, but to help that person.
Yeah, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I think we're both excited to see where cloning goes in the science world and
Yeah.
how governments will
definitely.
react to that and regulate it.
100%, yeah.
Welcome back to Ethics Unwrapped. We're heading into our fourth segment. Focus on autonomous weapon systems and autonomous vehicles. So we're going to be focused on autonomous systems as a whole, and
And also AWS systems, which is autonomous weapon systems.
and these technologies raise profound ethical questions and about safety, accountability, and decision making as a whole.
And where human decision should stop or end.
Yes. So this explores a lot of interesting ethical debates
Yeah.
we'd like to talk about. I mean, first I'd like to focus on autonomous vehicles, and I'd like to look at it from a utilitarianism perspective. You can see with the recent data that's come out about autonomous vehicles, it has the potential of saving around 500 million people annually to global accidents,
Yeah.
and it has a 94% better to chance to lower it by 94% fatalities caused by accidents. And if autonomous vehicles with data proven to show will lower the amount of deaths, it completely outweighs, and it's simple to say that from the utilitarianism view that autonomous vehicles are completely ethical and should be implemented. In that sense, people should not drive their own cars at all if you're looking at it from that viewpoint.
Well, I want to bring up, so this is also going to go, like the main argument against autonomous weapon systems is deontological ethics and Kantian principles. So Kantian principles, they're really all about that, like, you really shouldn't remove, like, the human from a situation. Obviously, this is a way more important when you go into autonomous weapon systems, just because it's a lot different, and it's a lot easier for a politician to say, I want this person to die and this huge group to die all the way across the world, and just no one really has to, like, be there. They just pull a button and just they're gone. And so I think, like, removing the human from that situation, especially when it's taking another human's life, is extremely dangerous. And relating that kind of back to autonomous vehicles, I think taking the human out. One, I love driving cars. That's the other thing. I mean,
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged there. But I think that taking the human out of, like, almost anything, especially when it involves decision making, which makes us human, arguably, I mean, it makes it way too easy. I think that just removing all the error almost can make room for more error. Because, like, what happens if, like, a terrorist group decides to use a bunch of autonomous vehicles, like, ram a car through a crowded, like, neighborhood? It's like they just bypass, like, whatever systems they have in place, and they're able to just, like, put a bomb on it.
It's very, very dangerous. Just I mean, all of that technology. If someone had access to that technology, it'd be detrimental. And I mean, there's so many. That's the way the technological world. That's going to happen as technology develops. I have something to bring up. It's like similar to the trolley problem.
Yeah.
If you would rather, how can you give these sort of life or death decisions to a automated computer?
Yeah, that's kind of like the whole debate with autonomous
Yeah.
weapon systems. Yeah, I mean, because basically it's just you sign a piece of paper and then they die. So I think removing, because, like, I think I'm actually gonna bring up, like, a historical reference here. World War II. So this was our second, like, major global conflict. We got out of it. One of our immediate responses was, we're not going to make all these people pay. We're going to help rebuild it. And a part of that was because there is such a widespread, everyone was suffering so much that they never wanted it to happen again. And so they wanted to implement a lot of systems that would prevent that. And the only way that really happened was because they had so many people on the ground, and for the politicians, it was personal. So for them, it wasn't easy to make a decision. It wasn't easy for them to, like, say, oh, just go do this. It was really hard because they knew they were going to lose lives. Mm-hmm. And so I think that especially in modern war, and as like the world moves closer and closer to like global conflicts. I mean, think about like a really good example right now. So you remember, in South Korea, how the prime minister implemented martial law.
I do not know that. No.
You did not hear about? Yeah, he just shut down the country. He did it in the middle, like a few weeks ago. Yeah, he just shut down the country in the middle of the night and implemented martial law. And thinking about martial law in South Korea is that like you need a majority of like what's equivalent to like the House of Representatives to vote on it. But since he did it in the middle of the night, no one could go to the place to vote on it. So the military basically shut it down. So like imagine if like just one person had all that power and it was just like for them it was just like a switch of a button. Yeah, I think that's like, so that goes obvious. So conspiracists will say no. The thing about the utilitarianism argument for that is that it's kind of a yes, because for them they actually want it'd be less lives lost. Yeah, essentially for like their side, even though it'd be causing harm to the other side. It would almost be like weighing the scale, which is really hard to do in war and easier to do with like your autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, I have an interesting point to bring up. What if AWS could follow along with the about the nuclear bomb theory? After nuclear bombs developed, it ensured like mutual destruction.
Yeah.
So overall deaths and like casualties after the nuclear bomb.
The thing is, the weapons that are being used here aren't as like catastrophic. I mean, they can be. They definitely can be. But there's a lot of drone strikes.
Yeah, but
really specific drone strikes.
What I was going to say is, it's losing the humanity aspect in war, which because you.
It also makes like what wars stop most of the time is that like one country's had enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I was just interested to hear what you had to say about that.
I think really like about that, it's I don't know. I mean, I guess like I don't think it'd be mutually assured destruction. I think it'd be mutually assured assassination. It would. I think it would get to the point where it would bother the people at the top so much because like they'd be getting hit. Mm-hmm. So it's such like a precise system that like then they would shut it down. But like I think obviously like before that like it would probably go way too far.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like politicians especially in war. You have the good guys and the bad guys.
Most of I don't know if it's ever unless during World War II it's pretty cut and clean. Yeah, but we'll say, like, that was really the only war.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. What I meant though is just like having the political figure that decides whether they strike on people. They have humility and they have compassion. Most of the time, giving it to an automated computer, they'll just decide whether it's a threat or not a threat, and just bow. So that's you could say that's looking at it from the deontological aspect, right? Just because there's no morality with the AWS systems at all. Which is a very complicated thought to think about.
Yeah. But that's also all the time we have for this segment, unfortunately. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the last episode of Ethics Unwrapped. I'm Harrison. This is Reese, and we're excited to talk about the Big Apple today.
Segment 5.
Yeah, so Apple. I think it might be the biggest company in the world now. It was definitely valued at like a year or two ago. It was like the first company that was like valued at over $1 trillion. But so we're going to be talking, I think first off, we're going to just get into utilitarianism. So after that, though, we're probably going to derail it pretty hard with some of their not so nice practices on how they get us our products that we use every day and that we're using to record this right now. So the argument for Apple, from a utilitarian perspective, is that they've helped advance technology a lot and have done a lot of philanthropy work over years. They have helped support schools. They've given a lot of computers away to schools that like wouldn't be able to receive them, wouldn't have them, helping them to get on an even footing with more well-off like private schools in the area,
as well as like what they're doing for the economy, the global economy, as well as like jobs. They're paying way higher wages than the average company.
They also have, ever since they got caught, is an important thing to say. Ever since they have gotten caught being exposed doing child labor, they have been implementing a lot stricter policies in China. But that's not really what we're talking about today, is it, Reese? We're going to talk about deontological ethics and some other nice little systems.
Should I go into deontological ethics?
Yeah, we can go into that right now, yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, considering the deontological ethics perspective, it emphasizes the importance of adhering to moral principles and moral rules. So you could argue from this perspective that Apple is doing the ethical thing because they are adhering to the laws inside the.
They're not breaking any laws.
They're not breaking any laws. They're adhering to the frameworks where they're manufacturing, and you can see this like an example of Ireland. They're using it to
they use it a lot to get money through, like just
from taxes.
Yeah, like they've avoided billions of dollars worth of taxes just in the past few years.
And you could say that's unethical, but from the deontological aspect, they're adhering to their moral principles.
It also has to be argued that the market is set up for companies to be like this. We do have a system in place to make sure they don't turn into a monopoly, which would arguably be very, very bad for our society. And people are kind of arguing that Apple is kind of a monopoly because there's really no one else other than Android really out there that can even get close to competing with them. And no other phone provider can really just pop up anymore, I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you can't really just become a phone provider anymore. But yeah, I would say that we can now get into some of the moral relativism aspects, which I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So moral relativism suggests that from an ethical context, Apple's use of tax evasion, all this other stuff, is bad. Just plain simple, it's bad. But it's also kind of like from where you're standing. So from Apple's perspective, they're not doing anything bad. From a government perspective, they're not doing anything bad. But from the factory worker who is working day in, day out, being forced to stay there sometimes, it's pretty bad for them.
But you could say before they got caught, after they implemented new legal frameworks, and they're paying. Look at it. If you're saying look at it from the worker's perspective, they'd be incentivized to work at Apple because they're getting paid more than the other factories there. So you could argue that they're being morally right, even though they are still.
But that's from Apple's perspective still. Like they're still like abusing like China has a system in place to like help promote companies, like outside companies to come in and then provide investment, but then their workers are not really seeing a lot of benefit. And so from that perspective, it's kind of like almost like Apple is working with China to like kind of keep that system in place so that way they can keep making cheap iPhones. But also, we wouldn't be able to have iPhones would be way more expensive, even more expensive than they are now, if that system wasn't in place.
Yeah, that's true. And more relativism probably better encapsulates this idea of the ethical, like, because the ontological, you could say
it's just rule based. Like there's really technically nothing to talk about there.
Yeah,
they're not breaking any rules
from that perspective
that we know of.
They're ethical, but moral relativism, it's saying it depends on the context, right?
Yeah.
And so from the worker, you could say it is morally right. Like you might, if you think from their perspective, they're getting paid more than they would before.
Yeah.
And they're getting a better opportunity. But if you look at it from the Western perspective, you're outsourcing your work, and which is negative. It's usually bad for your country, us, America, if you're outsourcing your work. Because
I want to actually touch on that too, because one, it's taking away American jobs. But one thing that people don't talk about a lot, that they don't really think about because it's just kind of not a thing, is that Apple has created an environment that in this space that they're the really only competitor other than Android, especially Macs. Or actually not Macs, that's not true. They're like laptops, I'm saying. But like, I would say that a lot of the time, like, it is impossible. Like, I don't know how you would really be able to, and also you would probably get like absorbed by Apple at some point. Like if like you start a company now and your goal is to like make phones, like they just want to let it happen. Like they have like way too big of a market share to like really do it. So from someone that, from like, I guess not the economist perspective, but like guess a regulatory perspective. Would that be?
Yeah,
I think it'd be more regulatory. Yeah,
Mhm.
like from their perspective, Apple is kind of like the big guy that's just bullying everybody and just getting away with it.
yeah. But how can you regulate that? Is the question.
Yeah, because like then like it sets up like if you get like if a company gets too big without being because like you know like they're technically now a monopoly.
And they pay so much tax.
Yeah, they
US
do
tax
pay a
dollars.
ton in taxes, but that's not. I think that's not really the point here. The point here is that Apple has set up an environment where it's impossible to compete.
Yeah, and that's not arguable.
Yeah,
And
which just kind of goes against.
Besides the competition aspect, there's also their working conditions and their evasion of taxes, their use of tax havens,
Yeah,
which really brings in.
which would arguably like all the good they've done. You could argue that more good could have been done if they just paid their taxes here, because it would have been so much money
Yeah,
instead of just shipping it all to Ireland. But
100%.
yeah, I think that's also a good point.
Yeah, and like whether it's through improving their labor conditions, enhancing their sustainability, or ensuring fair.
They do
contributions
do a
to
lot
society.
of research into sustainable practices, though.
Yeah, what I was saying is they have because they have the power to lead by example. They're like one of the biggest industries in the world, and if they enhance these strategies, they would really show how to be.
But it's not the thing is they don't
ethically.
companies aren't meant to lead by example.
Yeah,
That's not the point of them. But like it's like the moral obligation of the person at the top is to. Like Apple has completely optimized how their money making streams, and I think like in recent years they have like moved maybe a little more towards social good, either in like their ad placement or just kind of like raising social awareness through other issues. But I think the minute you kind of like wrote back like, hey, what about that one time y'all got caught for child labor in your factories? It kind of throws everything out the window.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good point to end on this segment.
Yeah.
And we'll go into our final reflections.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back to Ethics Unwrapped, and we'd like to go into our closing segment. As we wrap up our podcast, we want to take some time to reflect on how this course has shaped our perspective, the relevance of ethics in our personal and professional lives, as well as the challenges we anticipate in the future.
So when I first started, or before I started this course, I kind of saw like a lot of ethical systems just kind of theoretical. It just kind of like I didn't really have like a defined like I do this, I'm going to follow it this way, and I'm going to use these different proven principles to help guide my decision making. I didn't have any of that, so I didn't really go by that. I just kind of had a loose kind of like sense of like principles, values. That was like they still like help guide me, but like it's definitely this course has helped me a lot.
But refined.
Yeah, refined is a good word.
Mhm.
Yeah, refined is a really good word. Kind of like go into like that type of stuff.
Yeah, same here, honestly. And what really shaped my perspective was exploring different topics like cloning and autonomous vehicles. These discussions and debates forced me to like confront questions I hadn't considered, and it really makes you uncomfortable to explore the ambiguity of ethics and ethical questions, and like the role of human dignity in decision making or the balance between progress and accountability. It really challenged me to go beyond surface level debates and consider the deeper implications.
Right, yeah. So I mean, after taking this course, I can say that like a lot of it has a lot of personal like relevance now. So through like yeah, as I mentioned before, through decision making. And I think like using these ethical frameworks really help either like because a lot of this class has been we learned about an ethical framework like what we've been talking about, then we apply it to a real life scenario, and then that kind of like leaves you thinking afterward like, okay, how else can like this be applied, and like how else can this help me kind of like make a decision,
Like how else can you think about it?
yeah, like how else you can
Different
like think about it, yeah, like how is this person's kind of, because I think that's what like a really valuable way of studying ethics is like how other people think about things, so that way you can either one, because like a big part of this class also is debating and like presentation style, is kind of like how they are thinking about it and how you can respond to it based on what you think their systems are. And obviously it's going to be different, like there's probably a bajillion different ways of like interpreting all these systems, but it really helps you kind of like understand where the person's coming from.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I'd say like this class and this course in general has influenced my career goals because I've always been interested in technology, but now I have a stronger sense of responsibility to consider the ethical implications of innovations and how you can use that in your design as well. Like for instance, if I end up
Also designing a business too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the big one because like
Uh-huh.
it becomes a lot down to systems.
Yeah, completely agree. And like if I work in AI development, I'll prioritize the transparency and fairness of my work. And like by becoming more aware of these ethical challenges like companies face, like balancing profit with accountability, like you can really do that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't really agree more. I think really like my kind of last like thing for this is that just really like probably being like grateful that like we were able to like kind of learn a lot about this. That like we were able to kind of like take some time out of like school instead of just having to go learn about it on our own.
Yeah.
Because God knows, like I don't know if I would have like learned about it on my own just because of how busy I was. So thought it was really cool that like we had like this specific time to go learn about it. And it's pretty awesome that's like included in our college experience. But that was so this is how we're going to conclude it. Yeah, this is conclusion ethics unwrapped. Yeah.
I could say we'll go into our key takeaways a little bit.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, like my key takeaway is that this course has reinforced the idea that ethics doesn't have all the answers, and our professor really showed us that because we would have a bunch of different debates on a bunch of different topics with no right answer, and you can show like nothing is completely ethical, and our professor really showed us that well. And I believe like that's wrong with this generation, and especially like with politics in our country in general, is people aren't willing to have these conversations with differing perspectives
in a respectful manner.
Yeah, in a respectful manner, and I believe this course has really refined all of our skills in doing that, and will better ourselves in the future for sure.
Yeah. I don't really have anything else to add. Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's been a fun time. Yeah.
We hope you learned a thing or two.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
All right, this is Ethics Unwrapped. This is the conclusion of our first episode. Thank you very much. Stay tuned.
Yeah.